What's up, guys? This is Dan Watson, learningcameras.com, and I've got something a little bit different for you. We've got a LG G4, and the reason I've got this is because this is not your ordinary phone, but possibly kind of a photographer's dream phone, because the camera on here is 16 megapixels, optical image stabilization, aperture f1.8, full manual modes, even RAW shooting on this thing. So I really wanted to test this phone out and really take a look at most of the photography features. So let's dig into things. Now, the most important thing still is that this is going to be your phone. So, overall build quality is very good. You still get that plastic finish, but this is probably one of the best looking plastic phones available. LG just does have the leather options that you can go for. Haven't tested one out yet, but they look pretty nice. It's not that it's bad, it's just that it's not extremely stunning in any one angle, and so it kind of comes off a little bit ordinary. They do have some different colors, some different ways of customizing it. The back is removable, so that's a good touch. You do have a removable battery as well, and I must say that everything fit and finish wise does stack up. It just comes off as a little bit ordinary. Now, another one of the great things of that removable back is we do have access to a micro SD card slot, and you're definitely going to want that for this camera phone because you can take some pretty high resolution and even RAW shooting, which is going to take some space on there. So you can load this up with a micro SD card, remove the battery if that ever gets low. Now, one of the big things that LG went on about in their press conference was the screen. You have a very, very high resolution display. You also have one of the most color accurate displays, they say, on the market in a phone. And I must say that I did observe this to be true. When putting this up against my Note 3, which I never had a problem with before, you could really notice that it was oversaturated and changing the colors a little bit. So reds looked a little bit more orange. Whites didn't come out exactly white, and you could really see those differences on the G4. It's definitely one of the best displays, if not the best display I have ever used, and it really made a difference. And while I didn't notice it at first, when you really put them side by side, you can definitely see the differences. Now, as far as battery life goes, I was able to eke out a solid 1 day of moderate to heavy usage, even when I had a SIM card in this thing. And, overall, I'd say it's good. It's not great. It's not stunning. It's not the best on the market today, but you will get out a day, and that's more than I can say for a lot of the other phones on the market, so it's nice to see. And once again, you can just pop in another battery if you're ever making a long trip, and so LG has kind of made it easy and a little bit better to go the whole day on one battery change. Alright, so the time has come to dig into this camera, and here is where things get a little bit interesting. Manual mode on this thing is a dream come true. I must say that I am able to pick my shutter speed. You can't pick your aperture. It's going to be a fixed aperture at f1.8, which with a small sensor means basically almost everything is in focus almost all the time, unless you're shooting something a little bit more macro. You can adjust your ISO, and you can go pretty high on that, but remember, this is a small sensor camera, so you might not want to do that as much as you used to with your other cameras, so definitely take that with a grain of salt. You can go down to 50 and up pretty high on that one. But so let's take a look at some higher ISO shots. I shot this at 100 ISO, and honestly, things look pretty good in the JPEG files, and we increased this to 200, and I went all the way to 800, and you can see a little bit of grain. We're losing detail, but overall things look pretty steady up until around that 400 to 800 ISO mark. You do get optical image stabilization, which is certainly going to help as well, and that is optical as well, not digital, so it really is going to make a difference in the overall quality of your photos and being able to shoot at lower shutter speeds. Now, another thing that the G4 has is RAW shooting. Now, this one I was kind of excited about when it first came out, but this is one of the things that has kind of been mixed expectations so far in my testing. And the reason is that these are not good sensors. They really are not. And so most of what's making these good images are not the sensor themselves, but the processing. And nobody knows the camera performance and the way that the sensor is going to perform more than LG, who created this sensor camera combination and who knows exactly how to apply to this. And when you look at the RAW files from this, you can really see that things are messed up coming straight from the sensor. We've got vignetting like crazy, tons of grain. Overall colors don't look that great, and so the amount of processing you need to get this back to something as good as a JPEG file is up there, and it's going to be a completely different editing style than you're used to. You're going to find yourself putting at least 75% on my noise reduction on here to get rid of some grain. So definitely a lot of different information than what I'm used to with a normal camera. Now, here is where I did notice a difference, and the big thing is going to be your highlights. Your highlights have a very harsh fall off on a JPEG file, especially on these camera phones. But when I enabled RAW shooting and we take a look at the RAW file, my highlights are actually pretty smooth, and I do get to rescue just a little bit of those RAW highlights, and that makes a little bit of a difference on that. So I found when I'm shooting JPEG, I needed to kind of underexpose just a little bit, and I could boost the exposure shadows in post if I needed to, but those highlights really clip very, very easily on these cameras. And while this is nothing unique to the G4, this is probably the same on every camera and a little even better on the G4. This is just something that you have to deal with on these cameras. Not great dynamic range. The RAW file does eke out a little bit more on the highlights, but then again, you have to do so much processing to this file, you just start wondering if it's even worth it to begin with. The G4 also has a pretty amazing front-facing camera with 5 megapixels. Now, unfortunately, when we enable this, we lose our manual options, so you can't control overexposure, underexposure, anything like that. I would have preferred to be able to have that even on the front-facing camera, almost especially in the front-facing camera. But the overall quality on this thing is amazing. It does have a reduction for, smoothing for your face, and it's a little bit harsh, so you're going to want to turn that down. The default is just a little bit high, but overall it's pretty amazing for a front-facing camera phone. Definitely the best I've ever used. Overall, the G4 felt like a slightly above average phone with an amazing camera in it. It's definitely the best thing on the market camera-wise in any phone that I've ever used. And nothing from Apple, nothing from Samsung, any of those are going to beat this thing. And it's not just the quality, it's going to be the manual shooting modes, it's going to be the ability to shoot RAW when you need those highlights, and just the overall tone and quality and color is there on this thing. While overall the G4 wasn't exactly stunning in every way, things just kept me coming back to it more and more. It was a phone that let me go all day with one battery. If I needed to do 2 batteries, I could. It had my micro SD card. It had the leatherback options if I wanted to get stylish. The best looking camera, the best looking video on the market. It's hard to argue with the quality coming from this phone. The speed, the responsiveness, and that display are definitely worth this thing being at the top of your phone choices.